The pencil broke against the paper when the first explosion hit. Rachel Hayes looked up from her math worksheet, confused by the sudden orange flash outside the window. Her classmate Jenny turned in her seat, mouth open to ask a question that never came. The second explosion threw them all sideways. Mr. Peterson moved faster than Rachel had ever seen him move. He slammed the classroom door shut and locked it, then pulled down the window blinds in 3 quick motions. His hand shook. Outside in the hallway, someone screamed. It was not a fire drill scream or a prank scream. It was the sound of someone dying. Under the desks, now, Mr. Peterson whispered. His voice had gone quiet and tight. 23 students dropped to the floor and crawled beneath their desks like they had practiced for tornado drills. But this was not a tornado. The lights went out. Emergency red bulbs flickered on in the corners, turning everything the color of blood. Rachel heard boots in the hallway. Heavy boots that did not sound human. They made a clicking noise against the tile floor, like claws or metal. Something spoke in a language that hurt to hear. The words sounded like rocks grinding together, mixed with high-pitched whistles. Then came a reply in broken English through some kind of speaker system. All specimens will present themselves. Resistance means termination. Jenny grabbed Rachel's hand under the desk. Her palm was sweaty and cold. Rachel squeezed back, but said nothing. She had learned long ago that staying quiet kept you safe. At home with her drunk father. At school, when bullies walked past. Quiet meant invisible. The classroom door exploded inward. Wood and metal scattered across the floor. Rachel pressed herself against the wall beneath her desk, making her body as small as possible. Through the legs of chairs and desks, she saw them enter. They were not human. They stood on 2 legs, but that was where the similarity ended. Gray skin that looked like stone. For arms, 2 on each side of their torso. Their heads were wide and flat with no visible eyes, just dark patches that seemed to sense movement. They wore armor that glowed with purple lights and carried weapons that hummed with energy. Mr. Peterson stood up. He picked up a chair and held it like a weapon. Rachel wanted to scream at him to hide, to run, to do anything but stand there. But her throat had closed up completely. "You will not touch these children," Mr. Peterson said. His voice did not shake anymore. He sounded calm and certain, like he was telling a student to sit down and pay attention. The creature in front raised one of its weapons. A beam of white light shot out and hit Mr. Peterson in the chest. He did not fall down bleeding. He simply stopped existing. One moment he was there holding the chair, and the next moment there was just empty air and a burn mark on the wall behind where he had stood. Rachel bit down on her own hand to keep from screaming. She tasted blood. The creatures moved through the classroom, pulling students out from under desks. Some students fought back. Some tried to run. It did not matter. The creatures were too strong and too fast. They grabbed students with their multiple arms and dragged them toward the door. Some students they shot with a white beam. Rachel could not understand their selection process. It seemed random. Jenny was pulled out from beside Rachel. She kicked and screamed, her fingernails scraping against the floor as they dragged her away. Her eyes found Rachel's for just a second. Rachel saw the terror there, and the question, "Why are you still hiding? Why are you not helping me?" Rachel closed her eyes and pressed harder against the wall. She was not brave. She was not strong. She was just quiet. The creatures swept through the classroom in less than 3 minutes. They took 16 students. They killed 4 with the white beam, including Danny, who had sat in front of Rachel and always asked to borrow her pencil. They killed Sarah, who had shared her lunch with Rachel last week. They killed Michael, who made everyone laugh. They killed Amy, who wanted to be a doctor. Then the creatures left. Their boots clicked away down the hallway, dragging the surviving students with them. Rachel heard more screams from other classrooms. More explosions. More of that grinding rock language. She stayed under the desk. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. She could not tell. Her legs went numb, but she did not move. The emergency lights made everything look like the inside of a wound. Eventually, the sound stopped. No more screams. No more boots. No more weapons firing. The school became completely silent except for a distant alarm that kept ringing and ringing. Rachel waited. She counted her breaths. In and out. In and out. She counted to 1,000, then started over. She did this 6 times. When she finally crawled out from under the desk, her legs could barely hold her. The classroom looked like a bomb had hit it. Desks overturned, papers everywhere, burn marks on the walls and ceiling. And blood. Not much, but enough to know what had happened was real. She walked to the doorway on shaking legs. The hallway stretched out in both directions, empty and destroyed. Lockers hung open, their contents spilled across the floor. More burn marks, more blood, but no bodies. The creatures had taken everyone, living or dead. Rachel walked down the hallway in complete silence. Her shoes made no sound. She passed classroom after classroom, all empty. Some doors were blown open, some still closed, but with windows shattered. Every room told the same story. Students taken or killed. Teachers gone. She reached the main office. The front desk was abandoned. Coffee still sat in a mug, steam rising from it. The clock on the wall read 10:47 a.m. Rachel had gone to school that morning at 7:30. Everything had ended in just over 3 hours. She walked to the front entrance of the school. The glass doors were shattered. Beyond them, the parking lot was empty except for a few burning cars. The sky above was normal and blue, like nothing had happened, like the world had not just ended. Rachel stood in the doorway and looked back at the silent hallway behind her. 23 students had been in her classroom that morning. She was the only one who walked out, not because she was smart or brave or special, but because she was quiet, because she knew how to disappear. She stepped outside into the sunlight and felt nothing at all. The blanket smelled like chemicals and other people's sweat. Rachel pulled it tighter around her shoulders anyway. The refugee center had been a gym once, back when Earth had gyms and basketball games and normal things. Now it held 300 beds in neat rows, filled with people who had lost everything. 3 months had passed since the attack. The creatures had a name now. The Collective. They had hit 47 cities across Earth in coordinated strikes, taking millions of humans before something called the Galactic Council drove them away. Rachel heard people talking about it in the center. She did not join their conversations. She had not spoken a single word since the day of the attack. Dr. Linda Wu sat down on the floor next to Rachel's bed. She did this every morning, even though Rachel never responded. Dr. Wu was small and round with gray streaks in her black hair. She always brought 2 cups of tea, even though Rachel rarely drank hers. "Good morning, Rachel," Dr. Wu said softly. She set 1 cup on the floor within reach. "The weather is nice today. Some of the others are going outside to the garden. Would you like to join them?" Rachel shook her head once. Quick and sharp. "That's okay. We can stay here." Dr. Wu sipped her tea. She did not try to force Rachel to talk. She never did. That was why Rachel could tolerate her presence. Rachel picked up her notebook and pencil from beneath her pillow. She had filled 17 notebooks since arriving at the center. All of them showed the same thing, drawn over and over. The hallway at school. Different angles, different perspectives, but always the same hallway. Empty and silent and stained. She began to draw again. Her hand moved automatically now, tracing the lockers and floor tiles from memory. "Ambassador Trell is visiting today," Dr. Wu said quietly. "He works for the Galactic Council. He is looking for survivors who might be willing to testify against the Collective. There is going to be a trial." Rachel's pencil stopped moving. Her chest felt tight. "You do not have to do anything you are not ready for," Dr. Wu continued. "I told him about your situation. He understands. But he wanted me to ask." Rachel wrote in the margin of her drawing. "And oh," Dr. Wu nodded. "I will tell him. But Rachel, some of the students taken that day might still be alive. The council found labor camps where the Collective keeps humans. If there is a trial, if they are found guilty, rescue missions could be authorized." Jenny's face flashed in Rachel's mind, those terrified eyes asking why Rachel had not helped. Rachel's hand started shaking. She put down the pencil before she broke it. "Think about it," Dr. Wu said gently. She stood up with a small grunt, her knees popping. "No pressure. Just think about it." She walked away, leaving the untouched cup of tea behind. Rachel stared at it until it stopped steaming. That afternoon, Ambassador Trell arrived at the center. Rachel watched from her bed as he moved through the crowd. He was tall and reptilian, with green gold scales and yellow eyes with vertical pupils. He wore robes that shimmered like oil on water. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rumbling but kind. He stopped at various beds, talking quietly with survivors. Some people cried when they spoke to him. Some shouted angrily. Some just stared. Trell listened to all of them with the same patient expression. Rachel pulled her blanket over her head when he started moving toward her section of the gym. Maybe if she hid well enough, he would pass by. "I will not disturb you," Trell's voice said from nearby. Dr. Wu explained your difficulty. "I only wish to say that your survival matters. What you witness matters. If you are ever ready to share it, we will listen." Rachel stayed hidden under her blanket. She heard him walk away. She counted his footsteps until they faded completely. That night, Rachel had the nightmare again. The same one that came every time she closed her eyes. She was back under the desk, watching the creatures take her classmates. But in the dream, they saw her. They reached for her with their 4 arms, pulling her out into the open. Mr. Peterson stood in the corner, half dissolved by the white beam, pointing at her and asking why she had not saved them. She woke up gasping, covered in cold sweat. The gym was dark except for a few safety lights. Most people were asleep. Rachel sat up and reached for a notebook, but her hands are shaking too badly to draw. Someone moved in the shadows nearby. Rachel's heart hammered at her chest. Then a small figure stepped into the dim light. It was not human. It stood maybe 4 feet tall, with a thin body covered in pale blue chitin that looked like armor plating. For arms, but delicate ones with 3-fingered hands. Its head was oval-shaped with large compound eyes that reflected the safety lights like tiny mirrors. 2 antennae curved back from its forehead. Rachel's breath stopped. 4 arms, just like the collective. "Please do not be frightened," the creature said in soft, clicking English. "My name is Oren. I am a medic assigned to this center. I heard you having distress and wanted to check if you needed medical attention." Rachel scrambled backward on her bed until she hit the wall. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Oren raised all 4 hands in a calming gesture. "Understand, my species, the Kirill, share some physical similarities with the collective. We are not related. They are our enemies as much as yours. My entire colony was destroyed by them when I was young." Rachel stared at him, at his forearms, at his insect-like face. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but Oren did not come closer. He sat down on the floor, making himself smaller and less threatening. He folded all 4 of his hands in his lap. "I survived by hiding among the dead for 3 days," Oren said quietly. "I was 7 years old. The collective killed everyone in my hive. My mothers, my siblings, my friends. Everyone. When it finally left, I climbed out and found myself alone." Rachel's breathing slowed slightly. She watched him carefully. "For a long time, I could not speak either," Oren continued. "Every time I tried, I would remember the sounds of my people dying. The silence felt safer. But Dr. Wu helped me. She can help you too, if you let her." He stood up slowly, still keeping his distance. "I will not bother you again if you do not wish it. But I'm here if you need anything. Medical care, or just someone who understands." He walked away on silent feet, disappearing back into the shadows between the beds. Rachel sat against the wall for the rest of the night, hugging her knees to her chest. She thought about Oren hiding among corpses for 3 days. She thought about the students from her school who might still be alive in labor camps. She thought about Jenny's eyes asking why. When dawn light started filtering through the gym's high windows, Rachel picked up her pencil. But this time, she did not draw the hallway. She wrote 3 words in her notebook. "I was there." It was not much. It was barely anything. But it was the first step towards something that felt like purpose instead of just survival. Dr. Wu found her an hour later, still staring at those 3 words. The older woman sat down beside her bed and noticed the notebook. She did not comment on it. She just poured Rachel a cup of tea from her thermos and waited. Rachel took the cup. It was the first time she had accepted it. They sat together in silence as the refugee center woke up around them, and for the first time in 3 months, the silence felt slightly less crushing. The Galactic Council chamber looked like something from a science fiction movie, except it was real and Rachel was standing in it. The room was circular and enormous, with seats rising up in tiers around a central platform. Beings from dozens of different species filled those seats. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien that Rachel's brain struggled to process their shapes. She stood on the platform with her hands clenched into fists. Ambassador Trell stood beside her, his scaled hand resting gently on her shoulder. Dr. Wu sat in the front row, giving her an encouraging smile. Oren was there too, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights. Rachel had agreed to testify. She had written out everything she remembered in careful detail. 20 pages describing the attack, the creatures, what they took, and who they killed. Dr. Wu had submitted it to the council on her behalf. But now they wanted her to speak, out loud, in front of everyone. A being that looked like a floating crystal cluster spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. A translator device rendered it into English. The witness will provide verbal testimony to confirm the written account. Please state your name and what you witnessed. Rachel opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her throat had locked up completely, like someone had wrapped steel bands around it. Trell squeezed her shoulder gently. Take your time, he whispered. She tried again. Her lips moved, but no sound emerged. Sweat broke out on her forehead. The chamber was too big, too open, too many eyes watching her. She could feel them all staring, waiting, judging. From a section to her left, a voice spoke in heavily accented English. This is waste of time. Human cannot even speak. How can we trust written words from damaged mind? Rachel looked toward the speaker. It was one of the collective. She recognized the gray stone-like skin, the four arms, the flat, wide head. It wore formal robes instead of armor, but it was definitely one of them. Her vision started to tunnel. Her breathing came in short gasps. The collective representative continued. Humans are emotionally unstable species. They create false memories under stress. This testimony is unreliable. Another voice joined in, this one belonging to a tall being with smooth black skin and too many joints in its limbs. The Varn legal representative makes valid point. Without verbal confirmation, written testimony lacks weight. Perhaps the human should be excused. Rachel's knees started to shake. The room felt like it was spinning. She could hear the clicking of boots in a hallway, the grinding rock language, the screams. She was back under the desk, watching Jenny get dragged away, watching Mr. Peterson dissolve into nothing. I object, Trell said firmly. The witness has documented trauma. Her written account is detailed and corroborates other evidence. Forcing verbal testimony under these conditions is cruel and unnecessary. The crystal cluster being chimed again. The collective has right to face their accuser. If the human cannot speak, we cannot proceed with this portion of evidence. Rachel felt herself crumbling. Her carefully written testimony, all those nights staying awake to remember every detail, was being dismissed. Jenny and the others were still out there in labor camps, and Rachel could not even speak loud enough to help them. She turned and walked off the platform. Her legs barely held her. Dr. Wu stood up and tried to reach for her, but Rachel pushed past. She needed out of the chamber, out of the building, out of her own skin. She found a bathroom and locked herself in a stall. Her whole body was shaking. She pulled her knees to her chest and pressed her forehead against them, trying to breathe. But each breath felt like swallowing broken glass. Time passed. She did not know how much. Eventually, the bathroom door opened quietly. Light footsteps approached. Rachel. It was Oren's clicking voice. May I come in? Rachel did not answer, but she did not tell him to leave either. She heard him settle on the floor outside the stall. That was very difficult, he said softly. You were brave to even try. Rachel almost laughed, but it came out as a choked sound. Brave. She was the least brave person in the universe. I could not speak for 2 years after my colony died, Oren said. Not one word. When I finally did speak, do you know what I said? Rachel stayed silent. I said water, Oren continued. Just that one word. Because I was thirsty and pointing was not working. It was not a grand speech or important testimony. Just water. But it was a start. Rachel closed her eyes. She thought about all the words trapped inside her. All the things she wanted to say, but could not force past her locked throat. The collective lawyer is named Dren, Oren said. He is Varn species. They are known for being cruel in legal arguments. He wants you to fail. He wants you silent. Every moment you stay silent, he wins. Rachel's hands clenched. She hated that he was right. But, Oren continued, silence is also how you survived. You know when to be quiet. That is a kind of strength, too. Maybe you just need to find a different way to use your voice. The bathroom door opened again. Dr. Wu's voice called out, Rachel? Oren? Are you in here? We are here, Oren replied. Dr. Wu's footsteps approached. She knocked gently on the stall door. Rachel, Ambassador Trell wants to try something different. He is suggesting you record video testimony. Just you and a camera, alone in a private room. No crowds, no pressure. Would you be willing to try? Rachel lifted her head. A camera. Not people staring at her. Just a lens. Like talking to no one. She stood up slowly and unlocked the stall door. Dr. Wu and Oren both looked at her with patient, hopeful expressions. Rachel nodded once. They set up a small room with just a chair, a camera, and a glass of water. Dr. Wu showed Rachel how to start the recording, then left her alone. The door closed with a soft click. Rachel sat in the chair and stared at the camera lens. It stared back like a black eye. She could leave. She could walk out and give up and let the collective win. That would be easier. But then she thought about Jenny, about Danny and Sarah and Michael and Amy, about the 16 students dragged from her classroom, about Mr. Peterson standing up with a chair because he thought he could protect them. Rachel reached forward and pressed the record button. For a long moment, she just sat there. Then she opened her mouth. At first, nothing came out. Her throat still felt locked. But she pushed harder, forcing air past the blockage. The word came out as barely a whisper. My name. She stopped. Breathed. Tried again. My name is Rachel Hayes. The words were quiet and shaky, but they were there. Real. Spoken. I'm 16 years old. I was there the day they came. Her voice got slightly stronger with each word. I hid under my desk while they killed my teacher, while they took my classmates. I stayed silent because that is what kept me alive. But now, Rachel paused. She looked directly into the camera. Now I'm going to tell you everything I remember. Every detail. Every face. Everything. She talked for 40 minutes straight. Her voice never got loud, but it did not stop either. She described the gray skin and forearms, the white beam that made people disappear, the clicking boots and grinding language, the way they selected certain students and killed others, the blood on the hallway floor, the coffee that was still hot in the office. When she finally stopped, her throat was raw and her face was wet with tears she had not noticed crying. She turned off the camera and sat in silence. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something else. Something that felt almost like relief. The door opened. Dr. Wu, Oren, and Ambassador Trell stood there. All three looked at her with expressions of pride and respect. You did it, Dr. Wu said softly. Rachel stood up. Her legs felt weak, but steady. She looked at all three of them and managed to push one more word past her aching throat. Remember, it was just one word, but it was enough. The video testimony changed everything. Within 3 days, the Galactic Council voted to reopen the case against the collective. Rachel's recording had been detailed enough to identify specific raiders, specific weapons, specific tactics that violated multiple galactic treaties. Rachel watched the news reports in the refugee center's common area. Her face appeared on screens across the galaxy. Different species and different star systems watched her quiet, shaking voice describe the attack. Some reports called her brave. Some called her a key witness. One called her the girl who remembered everything. She did not feel brave. She felt exhausted. Dr. Wu sat beside her as they watched a legal analyst, some kind of floating jellyfish creature, discuss the case. Your testimony has given hope to a lot of families, Dr. Wu said. People who lost loved ones in the raids. They finally feel heard. Rachel nodded slowly. She had received messages. Hundreds of them. People thanking her, sharing their own stories, asking for her help. It felt overwhelming. She had barely managed to speak once into a camera. Now everyone expected her to be some kind of voice for all human survivors. You do not have to respond to any of them, Dr. Wu said, reading her expression. You have already done more than enough. But that was the problem. It did not feel like enough. Not when she knew there were still people in those camps. The news report changed. A new image appeared on screen. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. It was footage from the raid. Actual Futi. The collective had released it publicly. Warning, this content may be disturbing, the news anchor announced. Rachel should have looked away. Dr. Wu reached for the remote to turn it off. But Rachel grabbed her wrist and shook her head. She needed to see. The footage showed Riverside High from an outside camera. She watched the first explosion hit the East Wing. Watched students running from a building. Watched collective raiders herding them into groups. The video had no sound, but Rachel did not need it. She remembered every scream. Then the camera switched to an interior view. A camera. Her hallway. Rachel watched students running past, trying to find exits. Watched teachers shouting instructions. Watched the raiders moving through like they were harvesting crops. The footage showed her classroom door exploding inward. Showed Mr. Peterson standing up with the chair. Showed the white beam hitting him. Rachel's hand started shaking, but she could not look away. She watched her classmates being dragged out. Watched some of them fighting. Watched others frozen in terror. The camera angle did not show under the desks. It did not show Rachel hiding, but she knew exactly where she had been in that moment. 3 feet from the camera's view, pressed against the wall, barely breathing. The footage ended. The news anchor reappeared. The collective claims this video proves they were removing violent specimens who resisted lawful authority. They maintained their actions were justified under salvage laws. Rachel stood up abruptly and walked away from the screen. Her vision was blurry. She barely made it to the bathroom before she threw up everything in her stomach. She knelt on the cold tile floor, shaking. She had just watched her friends die. Had watched the moment that destroyed her entire world played out in clinical detail on a news broadcast. And the collective was calling it justified, calling her classmates violent specimens. She heard the bathroom door open, but did not look up. Rachel. It was a new voice, young and male and uncertain. Rachel lifted her head slightly. A boy around her age stood in the doorway. He had dark skin and short curly hair. His eyes were red from crying. Sorry, I can leave, he said quickly. I just saw you watching the footage, and I recognized you from your testimony video. I am David. David Wilson. I was at Lincoln High when they came. Rachel wiped her mouth and sat back against the wall. She did not tell him to leave. David sat down on the floor across from her, keeping a respectful distance. They released footage from my school, too. I just watched my best friend get taken. Watched him calling my name while I hid in a storage room. His voice cracked. I hid just like you did. Stayed quiet while they took everyone else. Rachel looked at him properly. She saw the same guilt in his eyes that she felt every day. The same question that ate at her constantly. Why did I survive when they did not? People keep calling us survivors, David continued, like we did something special. But we just hid better than everyone else. We were quiet while our friends were screaming for help. Rachel felt something crack open in her chest. For 3 months, she had carried this guilt alone. Even Dr. Wu and Oren, for all their kindness, could not truly understand. They had not hidden while their friends died. They had not survived by being forgettable. But David understood. She could see it in every line of his face. She pulled out the small notebook she always carried and wrote. I hear them screaming every night. David read it and nodded. Me too. Every time I close my eyes. They sat in silence for a while. Not the crushing, isolating silence Rachel had lived in for months, but a shared silence. The silence of 2 people who had survived the same nightmare and did not need words to understand each other. Eventually, David spoke again. I tried to record a testimony like you did. I could not do it. Every time I started talking about that day, I would freeze up. How did you get through it? Rachel wrote. I remembered them. All of them. Their names. Their faces. If I could not save them then, at least I can make sure people know they existed. David read it twice, then wiped his eyes. There are others. Other kids who hid during the raids. I have been talking to some of them online. We are all dealing with the same thing. The guilt. The nightmares. The feeling like we should have done something different. He looked at her hopefully. Maybe we could help each other? share our stories, even if just between us. I know it is hard to talk, but maybe writing or recording when we are ready, or just knowing we're not alone. Rachel thought about it. For months, she had isolated herself, thinking she was the only one who felt this way. But there were others. Kids who had survived by hiding, by staying silent, by being forgettable. Kids who carried the same guilt and shame. She wrote, "A group for the quiet ones." David smiled for the first time since entering the bathroom. Yeah, exactly that. Over the next 2 weeks, David helped Rachel connect with other survivors. They met in video calls at first, just a handful of teenagers who had all survived by hiding. Some could talk freely. Others, like Rachel, mostly wrote or typed their thoughts. But they all understood each other. They shared their nightmares, their guilt, their anger at being called survivors when they felt more like cowards. They cried together. They sat in silence together. They existed together without judgment. And slowly, Rachel started to feel something shift. The guilt did not disappear. The nightmares did not stop. But they felt slightly less crushing when she knew she was not carrying them alone. One night, during a video call with the group, a girl named Lisa shared something she had learned. I talked to a trauma counselor. She said we all have survivor's guilt. But she also said something else. She said that staying alive was not a failure. That witnessing what happened and being able to tell people about it matters. But we did not fight back, another boy said. We just hid. Maybe that is okay, Lisa replied. Maybe there are different kinds of strength. Maybe surviving is enough. Rachel thought about that long after the call ended. Maybe surviving was enough. Maybe her quiet voice, even if it only worked through cameras and notebooks, mattered just as much as a loud one. She opened her laptop and started writing. Not testimony this time, not a legal document, just a letter. To Jenny, to Danny and Sarah and Michael and Amy. To all of them. She wrote about the guilt she carried, about watching them get taken while she hid, about how she heard them calling for help and did nothing, about how she was sorry. So sorry. And she wrote about what she was doing now, about the testimony, about the other survivors she had met, about how she was trying, in her own broken way, to make their deaths mean something. She wrote until dawn, tears streaming down her face. When she finally finished, she had filled 30 pages. She would never send it. There was no one to send it to. But writing it felt like speaking directly to them for the first time since they died. At the bottom of the last page, she wrote one final sentence. I survived by being quiet. I will honor you by never being silent again. She meant it. Rachel stood in front of her mirror and practiced breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Dr. Wu had taught her this technique months ago. It helps sometimes. Today, she was going to speak live in front of the Galactic Council. No camera between her and the audience. No privacy. Just her and thousands of eyes watching from across the galaxy. She could still back out. Ambassador Trell had made that clear. But her video testimony had only gone so far. The collective's lawyers were arguing that recorded statements could be edited or manipulated. They wanted live testimony or nothing. So Rachel had requested this. Against every screaming instinct in her body, she had asked to face them. Orin knocked gently on her door. It is time, he said softly. Are you ready? Rachel nodded, even though she was not ready. She would never be ready, but she was going anyway. The council chamber was packed. Every seat filled with beings from across known space. Rachel walked to the central platform with Dr. Wu on one side and Orin on the other. Her legs shook, but they kept moving forward. She took her place at the speaker's podium. A microphone extended toward her on a flexible arm. She gripped the edges of the podium to keep her hands from shaking visibly. The crystal cluster being chimed. The council recognizes Rachel Hayes of Earth. You may proceed with your testimony. Rachel looked out at the crowd. Somewhere in that mass of alien faces were collective representatives. She could feel them watching her, waiting for her to fail. She opened her mouth. At first, nothing came out. The silence stretched. She heard someone shift in their seat. Someone else cough quietly. Then she forced the words out. My name is Rachel Hayes. Her voice was quiet, but the microphone carried it through the chamber. I am 16 years old. I was there when the collective attacked Riverside High School. Her voice cracked on the word school, but she kept going. They came without warning. They broke into our classrooms. They killed my teacher, Mr. Peterson, with a weapon that made him disappear. Just gone, like he never existed. Rachel's hands tightened on the podium. They took 16 students from my classroom. Some they killed, some they dragged away. I hid under my desk and stayed quiet while my friends screamed for help. I stayed quiet because that was the only way to survive. She paused to breathe. The chamber was completely silent now. Everyone listening. I watched them take Jenny Rodriguez. She sat next to me in class. She shared her lunch with me. She was going to be a veterinarian. They dragged her down the hallway while she kicked and screamed. Rachel's voice got slightly stronger, pushed forward by something that felt like anger. I watched them kill Danny Chun. He was 14. He liked skateboarding and terrible jokes. They shot him with a white beam because he tried to run. She went on, naming every person from her classroom. Every single one. Their names, their ages, what they wanted to be when they grew up. The things that made them human and real and worth remembering. Sarah Kim wanted to be a doctor. Michael Torres played guitar. Amy Patel wrote poetry. They were not specimens. They were not salvage. They were people. They were my friends. And they were murdered or kidnapped by the collective. Rachel looked directly at the section where the collective representatives sat. She found Dren, the Varn lawyer who had called her damaged and unreliable. He stared back with his black eyes, expressionless. For 3 months, I could not speak about this. The words were stuck inside me. But I remembered everything. Every face, every scream, every detail. Because someone needed to remember them. She spoke for 2 hours without stopping. She described the gray, stone-like skin of the raiders, the clicking sound their boots made, the way they communicated in that grinding rock language. She described their weapons, their tactics, their armor, everything she had seen while hiding under that desk. Her throat hurt. Her voice got rough and quiet toward the end, but the microphone picked up every word. No one in the chamber moved. No one interrupted. When she finally reached the part about walking out of the school alone, finding the empty hallways and abandoned coffee cup, her voice broke completely. But she pushed through the last few sentences. I survived by being forgettable, by being quiet. That is what saved me. But it is also what I have to live with. I was silent while they died. So now I am speaking for them. For all 47 of them. Every name, every face, every person that the collective wants us to forget. Rachel pulled a small data chip from her pocket. Her hand shook as she held it up. I also have this, she said. During the attack, one of the raiders dropped a piece of equipment near my hiding spot. I took it. I did not know what it was at the time. I just grabbed it because it was there. Oren had helped her analyze the chip over the past months. What they found had changed everything. This chip contains data logs from the raid. Times, locations, and something else. Selection criteria. Rachel's voice got hard. The collective did not randomly take students. They selected specific ones. Students with high test scores in science and math. Students with certain genetic markers. They were harvesting humans for specific purposes. The chamber erupted in noise. Multiple species started talking at once. The crystal cluster being chimed loudly for order. Dren stood up abruptly. That evidence is inadmissible. Chain of custody is broken. The human could have tampered with it. The human has a name, Rachel said, surprising herself with the sharpness in her voice. And I did not tamper with anything. Galactic Council technicians verified the data 3 days ago. It is authentic. Ambassador Trell stood from his seat. The technical analysis confirms the chip's authenticity and age. It was created on the date of the raid and contains information that only the collective would have had access to. The data chip proved what Rachel had suspected but could not prove before. The collective had not been conducting random raids. They had been selectively harvesting humans based on intelligence and genetic potential. That violated multiple galactic laws about species, trafficking, and forced labor. Dren's calm demeanor cracked. This is absurd. The collective was removing dangerous specimens under salvage protocols. Salvage protocols do not allow for targeted selection based on genetic testing. Another council member called out. If this data is accurate, the collective was conducting illegal harvesting operations. The human is lying, Dren said, his voice rising. She is damaged, traumatized, unreliable. She hid like a coward while her people were taken. Why should we believe anything she says? Rachel felt the words hit her like physical blows. Damaged, coward, unreliable. Every fear she had about herself, spoken out loud in front of everyone. But then she looked at the data chip in her hand. She thought about Jenny and Danny and Sarah. She thought about David and Lisa and all the other quiet ones who had survived by hiding. She thought about Oren hiding among corpses for 3 days. You are right, Rachel said quietly. I am damaged. I have nightmares every night. I cannot speak for 3 months. I'm terrified right now, standing here in front of all of you. She looked directly at Dren. But I remember everything. Every detail. Every name. And this data chip does not lie. She turned to address the entire council. The collective wants you to focus on my fear, my trauma, my silence. They want you to dismiss me because I am broken. But being broken does not mean being wrong. I survive by being quiet and forgettable. That is exactly why my testimony matters. Because I saw everything and they did not notice me. The chamber went silent again. Rachel felt something shift in the room. She had admitted her weakness, her damage, her fear. And somehow that made her testimony stronger, not weaker. The crystal cluster being chimed. The council will review the data chip evidence. If it is authenticated as described, this changes the nature of the charges significantly. Dren sat down slowly, his expression dark. Rachel stepped back from the podium. Her legs nearly gave out, but Oren caught her arm and steadied her. Dr. Wu hugged her tightly. You did it, Dr. Wu whispered. You spoke for all of them. Rachel looked back at the council chamber, at the thousands of beings watching, at Dren glaring at her with hatred in his eyes. She had spoken. She had remembered. She had given names and faces to the 47 people the collective wanted to erase. It was not enough to bring them back. Nothing would ever be enough for that. But it was something. It was a start. And for the first time since the day everything ended, Rachel felt like maybe surviving meant more than just staying alive. The verdict came down 6 weeks after Rachel's testimony. The Galactic Council found the collective guilty of illegal harvesting, species trafficking, and multiple treaty violations. The evidence from the data chip had been impossible to refute. Rachel watched the announcement from the refugee center common area, surrounded by Dr. Wu, Oren, David, and dozens of other survivors. When the crystal cluster being chimed out the word guilty, the room erupted in cheers and tears. Rachel did not cheer. She felt numb. Guilty was just a word. It did not bring anyone back. But then the council announced the sentence. All known collective labor camps were to be raided immediately. All human prisoners were to be rescued and returned to Earth. The collective's assets would be seized to pay for reparations and medical care. That was when Rachel let herself cry. The rescue missions took 3 months to complete. They found labor camps on 17 different worlds. The conditions were horrible. Humans forced to work in mines, factories, research facilities. Some had been experimented on. Some were barely alive. But 340 humans were rescued. 340 people who had been taken from Earth during the raids. Rachel worked with the rescue coordination team, helping identify possible locations based on patterns in the data chip. She could not go on the missions herself, but she could help from Earth. Her memory for details, for patterns, for the small things others missed, proved invaluable. When the first transport ship arrived with rescued prisoners, Rachel was there at the landing site. She watched them disembark, wrapped in blankets, some on stretchers, all looking thin and haunted. She did not know if anyone from her school would be among them. The chances were slim, but she had to be there anyway. Then she saw her. Thinner, with scars on her arms and a haunted look in her eyes, but alive. Jenny Rodriguez stepped off the transport ship, supported by a medical worker. Rachel's breath stopped. She tried to move forward, but her legs would not work. Jenny looked around at the crowd of people waiting to greet the survivors. Her eyes passed over Rachel without recognition at first, then stopped, came back, widened. Rachel. Jenny's voice was hoarse and uncertain. Rachel walked forward on shaking legs. They met halfway. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Jenny grabbed her in a fierce hug. I thought you were dead. Jenny whispered. I thought everyone was dead. I thought I was the only one. Rachel hugged her back, unable to speak. 3 months of silence, and now she could not find words, even though her voice had mostly returned. You were under the desk, Jenny said, pulling back to look at Rachel's face. I remember. You were hiding. I saw you right before they dragged me out. I tried to signal you to stay quiet, to stay hidden. Did you get out? Rachel nodded. Her throat felt tight. Good, Jenny said fiercely. Good. I'm glad you hid. I'm glad you survived. Over the next weeks, 3 more students from Riverside High were found among the rescued. Stephen, who had sat 2 rows behind Rachel in math class. Patricia, who had been in the band. And Tyler, who had always been the first one picked for basketball teams. They all gathered one evening at the refugee center. For survivors from the same school, reunited months after the attack. They sat in a circle and shared their stories. Stephen had been forced to work in a mining operation. Patricia had been in a research facility where they studied human memory. Tyler had barely survived the camps. He still could not walk without assistance. They all carried scars, visible and invisible. But they were alive. I saw your testimony, Stephen said to Rachel. They played it for us in the camps. The guards thought it was funny at first, showing us a scared girl who could barely talk. But then we all started listening. You remembered everyone's names. You told the council what happened to each of us. You gave us hope, Patricia added. Knowing someone out there remembered us. Knowing someone was fighting for us. Rachel shook her head. I should have fought that day. I should have helped instead of hiding. No, Jenny said firmly. If you had fought, you would be dead. Then no one would have testified. No one would have remembered. You survived so you could speak for us. That matters more than you know. Rachel wanted to argue, but Dr. Wu put a hand on her shoulder. They are right, Dr. Wu said gently. You honored them by remembering, by speaking when you could finally find your voice. Later that week, Ambassador Trell contacted Rachel with an offer. The Galactic Council wanted to create a new position, advocate for trauma survivors across all species. They wanted someone who understood both the trauma and the long road to recovery. Someone who could help others find their voice. Rachel almost said no immediately. She was still struggling with her own recovery. She still had nightmares. She still sometimes could not speak when the panic attacks hit. But then she thought about the other quiet ones. The survivors who hid and felt guilty for living. The ones who could not find words for what happened to them. I cannot do it alone, Rachel told Trell. I'm still broken. I still struggle every day. That is precisely why you are qualified, Trell replied. Healing is not about being fixed. It is about learning to carry what happened and move forward anyway. You understand that. You can help others understand it too. Rachel took the position, but on her terms. She would work with a team. Dr. Wu as medical advisor. Oren as liaison to non-human survivors. David, Lisa, and other members of the Quiet Ones group as peer counselors. Together, they created support networks for survivors across multiple species. They developed new trauma treatment protocols. They advocated for better protection laws. They made sure that survivor testimony was taken seriously, even when it came from people who were still healing. 6 months after the verdict, Rachel returned to Riverside High. The building had been turned into a memorial site. Hallways were lined with photos of students and teachers who died or were taken. Their names were carved into black marble walls. Rachel walked the hallway where she had hidden. Her hallway, the one she had drawn hundreds of times. It looked different now, cleaned up and memorialized. But she could still see the blood stains in her mind. Could still hear the screams. Oren, Dr. Wu, David, Jenny, Stephen, Patricia, and Tyler walked with her. They had all chosen to come, to face this place together. Rachel stopped in front of the wall with names. 47 names from her school alone. She touched Danny Chin's name, traced the letters with her finger. I survived by being silent, she said quietly. Her voice was stronger now, though still soft. I hid while you called for help. I stayed quiet while you screamed. And I have to live with that every day. She paused, breathed, continued. But I promise you this. I survived so I could remember. So I could speak when you could not. So I could make sure the galaxy knows what happened here. Knows your names. Knows you mattered. Jenny put her arm around Rachel's shoulders. You kept your promise, she said. You spoke for all of us." They placed flowers at the memorial. Each of them said a few words, sharing memories of the people they lost. It hurt. It would always hurt. But there was something healing in speaking the names out loud, in this place together. As they left the school, Rachel looked back one last time. The building stood silent in the afternoon sun, a monument to a terrible day, but also a reminder of what came after, of how speaking truth, even with a quiet voice, could change things. Rachel turned away and walked forward, toward the waiting car, toward her work with other survivors, toward a future that still included nightmares and bad days, but also included purpose and connection and hope. She was not the same girl who had hidden under that desk. That girl was gone, dissolved in trauma and fear. But this girl, this Rachel Hayes who remained, had learned something important. Silence had kept her alive, but her voice, however quiet and shaking it might be, had saved others. Both were true. Both were valid forms of strength. At the refugee center that evening, Rachel stood in front of a room full of survivors. Some were human. Some were Kirill like Oren. Some were species she had never seen before. All of them carried trauma. All of them struggled to speak about what happened to them. "My name is Rachel Hayes," she began. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I'm a survivor, and this is what happened." She told her story, not the testimony version, polished for courts and councils, but the real version, the fear, the guilt, the silence that both protected and imprisoned her, the long, difficult path to finding her voice again. When she finished, others began to share, slowly at first, then faster. Some spoke, some wrote, some just cried, but they all shared, knowing they were heard and understood. This was Rachel's work now, not saving people or fighting battles, just witnessing, remembering, helping others find the strength to speak their truth, however that looked for them. It was not the life she had imagined at 16, but it was the life she had, built from the broken pieces of that terrible day. And somehow, impossibly, it was enough. As the meeting ended and survivors left in small groups, Rachel noticed a young girl lingering near the door. She looked about 14, with dark circles under her eyes and a notebook clutched to her chest. "Excuse me," the girl said quietly. "I was at the Lincoln raid. I hid in a closet for 8 hours. Everyone else from my class was taken or killed. I cannot stop thinking that I should have done something." Rachel recognized that look, that guilt, that weight. She walked over and sat down beside the girl. "My name is Rachel. What is yours?" "Anna," the girl whispered. "Anna," Rachel repeated. "I'm glad you survived. I'm glad you are here. And I want you to know that hiding was not wrong. Surviving is not wrong. You did what you needed to do." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "But everyone else—" "I know," Rachel said gently. "I know. It is going to hurt for a long time. Maybe forever. But you are not alone. And when you are ready, we will help you find your voice. However long that takes." Anna nodded, unable to speak. Rachel handed her a tissue and sat with her in comfortable silence. This was how it worked. One survivor helping the next. One quiet voice encouraging another. Building something from the wreckage. Rachel looked around the room at all the survivors connecting, sharing, healing together. She thought about Jenny and the others rescued from the camps. She thought about the 47 names on the memorial wall. She had survived the silent classroom and the deadly hallway. She had lived when so many died, and now she was using that survival to help others survive too. It was not redemption. Nothing could redeem that day, but it was purpose. It was meaning. It was a reason to keep going. And for Rachel Hayes, that was enough.